Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 83 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. We're back to your regular, scheduled, good old non-Gen Con. No one wants to hear about that convention anymore. We're back in Los Angeles talking about board games. How are you guys doing? These are my co-hosts, Mark and Callan.
Doing good.
It's always good to be regular.
Absolutely. That's what my doctor tells me every week.
Every week?
Every week. That's how regular I am about being regular, Mark.
Holy shit. Get it? Holy shit.
You're such a... Oh, no. We can't... I'm blushing.
Look, you cursed.
I'm blushing.
A sailor.
So I don't curse.
But
I've never cursed
invoking
before.
bodily functions is not the same thing.
I'll do whatever it takes to
Exactly.
get a laugh.
I have a sense of propriety, Mark.
Which is the first time Kellen has ever said that. This week on the show, we're going to be talking about dexterity games. This topic was suggested to us by a listener. So what we thought we'd do is do one of our famed top 5 lists of our favorite dexterity games. That's going to be coming up later in the episode. Before we get there, let's talk about the games that we've been playing this last week. Starting off with Kellen. What have you been playing?
All right. You're going to have to go along for the journey on this one, guys. This game is called The Wizard Always Wins. I have no idea who makes it because it's not a normal game company. Let me look real quick. The box is like purple, right?
This is also available at Target.
No.
It is. It's a purple box. Yeah, purple box.
I don't play Target games.
We're quasi-sponsored by Target.
Oh, yeah, sponsored by Target. Okay, so this game is called The Wizard Always Wins. The publisher is Big G Creative, and it has one of the most hideous box arts I have ever seen in my life. I mean, it's cool because it's predominantly purple. But The Wizard Always Wins is a game of action selection a la Citadels. So there is a series of powers that you can take, or people. The wizard, for example, the huntress, among other things, and those are ranked from 1 to 7. And then everyone around the table will choose a hero, and then they will use that power in order, and then a round will begin. Based on the order of the power level, quote-unquote, of the character that you chose, that will determine the player order for the next round, and you will rinse and repeat. So what are you doing in The Wizard Always Wins? Well, you are trying to load your gems of a specific color into the bag. So this is a bag builder. This is perhaps the best bag builder I have ever played. All you have to do to win the game, and this is why the game is called The Wizard Always Wins. This is the conceit. You have to choose the wizard character, and that allows you to pick gems out of the bag. If you pick out your own gem from the bag, you win the game. That's the game.
Right.
So in the second round of the game, you could win the game by, in the first round, loading a gem into the bag, and then in the second round, defying all odds. You could say, I choose wizard, pull your thing out of the bag, and then the game is over. And the wizard will have won the game. The wizard always wins. This game is very, very silly. I've seen it on a lot of lists on Board Game Geek for works better than it should, more fun than it has any right to be, and that is 100% apt for The Wizard Always Wins. This is exceedingly silly because everyone is building up a little engine. They're collecting resources. They're trying to load both the gems into the bag as well as their ability to draw more from the bag. So you as a wizard level up. So this is a concept that our game group has taken to quite amazingly, which is that once you become level 2 wizard, I believe you draw 2 from the bag now instead of just the 1. So you double your chances for winning the game. Well, we have many different games going at game night, but now anytime anyone has leveled up, they immediately start screaming, you know, we have a level 2 wizard, you know, level 3 wizard over here. And you have to interrupt the game. Right. So you kind of go, so I now go, Dean, Dean, we have a level 4 wizard over here, Dean. And until they acknowledge you, you don't stop bothering them. What do you think of this, Neelan?
I liked it. Like you said, it's better than it has any right to be. The mechanics are actually surprisingly clever in a lot of very simple ways, in that the way that the wizard is the most powerful role pick, right? So you could theoretically not be allowed to pick that 2 turns in a row if any other player blocks you. So there's little clever stuff like that. It's the balance of deciding what is going to be better for your probability of winning, which is either putting more gems in or leveling up to be able to pull more, which is not really that strategic, but it's a fun consideration because you at least need to get 1 gem in there. As soon as you get 2 gems in there, your chances are double. As soon as you get to level 2, your chances are double. So there's fun stuff to think about there. But it's also loose and it's so silly, and it's just this conceit to like you said, stand up from the table, shout at the other end of the table, and make sure that they hear you announce that I am a level 4 wizard now. It's great.
Yeah, just by a function of the end game condition, which is so unique, you have to be okay with a little
Yeah.
And that is just this idea that, well, my first game of it, I became a level 2 wizard, and everyone around me was tryharding, trying to get to level 3, 4, and 5, and I just kept choosing wizard and pulling out of the bag. My odds weren't great, but the third time I did it, I pulled it out of the bag, and every time I would pull gems out, everyone around the table would say, this game is garbage if you pull it out. If you pull it out, like, I'm never playing this again. And then on the third time, the wizard always won, and that was me. You know, you can also measure success for a game like The Wizard Always Wins. Someone else in the game group has already purchased their own copy, so apparently I'm now missing out on screaming at Dean and saying that I'm now a level 3 wizard, which I'm very upset about. But that is The Wizard Always Wins. But it is novel. It's a novel endgame thing that I've not... I guess it's novel because it's kind of foolhardy, probably.
Yeah, it's certainly not something you'd want to put into most bigger games, but in this fair, it works great.
Yeah, that is The Wizard Always Wins.
I played a classic game by Rudiger Dorn. I know this is one of Kellen's favorites. This is...
Do you listen to me ever?
I played it. You said it's your favorite. I subsequently played it. What are you talking about?
You're looking me dead in the eyes right now. You're saying... I played this game because of your recommendation.
It was a factor, a small one, but
a contributing factor.
But a factor. So this was Genoa, which used to be known as Traders of Genoa, but I played the updated version of it. I don't know what
still looks old
aesthetic. Yeah, it does look old.
It still looks old.
So Rudiger Dorn is a designer of a lot of well-regarded games. Goa, Louis XIV, Karuba. But the game that this feels like or has a large through line with, I think, is Istanbul. So what you're doing in Genoa is it's actually a very simple Euro game in terms of its scoring. You're scoring in basically one of three ways. You're scoring by doing sort of like a pick up and deliver mechanism where you're trying to make sure that two spots on the map are connected. There's like a recipe fulfillment mechanism where you're trying to gather resources to fulfill a card that you've picked up and are trying to deliver those goods to the place on the card. And finally, there's sort of a set collection aspect where you're trying to pick up cards that share the names of buildings that line the map, and you're trying to build sets of these places that are connected. So if you have cards that name 4 connected buildings, that's worth something. And if you have 5 in a row, that's worth even more. But the thing that makes this game great, and again, this is like one of those games where, you know, this is from originally 2001, but it feels like it could have been released yesterday. On your turn, when you're the sort of the lead player, and the lead player rotates around the table, you'll roll 2 dice, and that'll tell you where you start on the board. So you can be plopped anywhere on this board, and then you have a stack of chips, sort of a la Istanbul. So if you're familiar with Istanbul, you have a set of, I think in Genoa, it's either 5 or 6 chips.
I think it's a player count changes.
5 or 6 chips that are stacked up. And again, like Istanbul, whenever you move, you are going to leave behind a chip wherever you came from. And whenever you enter a space that contains a building, so most of the space on the board contain a building, but there is like a road also to traverse the city. But whenever you land on a space with a building, as the lead player, choose to take the action, or if nobody else wants to take the action, you can continue moving with no penalty or no action being taken. But if anybody at the table offers you money to take that spot's action, you now either must take the action yourself or you must accept the bid of the player. So if I land on the harbor, for example, and I'm not really interested in the harbor, I'm just going through the harbor to get somewhere else I want to go to, and I just want to keep moving, but Neelan says, I'll pay you $5 to use the harbor. Now either I have to do it, or I have to take Neelan's bid, or I have to try to get Kellen involved to up the bid. So
and you can only take one action on your own turn.
Right. Everybody can take one action on their turn, except if you pick up a token from a location called the park, but predominantly you're taking one action per turn. So, you know, that one move is valuable. So if I was just trying to go through the harbor to get to the other side, and Neelan has now put it up for bid, that can put a wrinkle in my plans. But beyond that bidding aspect, anything basically in this game is up for negotiation. You can pay the player to start moving the stack in one direction. Like, you can say, I don't care where you go, but I just want you to go north. Or a player can say, hey, I'll pay you $15 to take the post office action, and you could say, I'll pay you $5 just not to even go there. I don't care where you go. I'll pay you $5 just not to go to that space. So it's a ton of negotiation in a game that is like, the negotiation aspect aside, a straightforward Euro. I mean, it is a Euro in all respects except for this negotiation thing, which is like what makes the game. It was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. That Euro framework lent such a support to all the negotiations that were going on. You know, the money is hidden, all these cards, the recipes you're filling is hidden. So there's like this tension because you never know where anybody stands. You never know what anybody's going for. Like, why is he trying to lead Neil into like a specific villa? Like, why is he going there? Does he have a big recipe that he's going to fulfill? There's this tension we had in our game. One of the players was convinced another one was running away with it. And I feel like his enthusiasm for the other player made that player feel like he was running away with it. And then that formed like we sort of felt like we had to bash him. And we weren't doing a good job of it. So when the final count came out, I thought this player who'd been talked up was going to have first place by a mile. He ended up finishing in fourth. But it was just this tension this entire, this like paranoia, this like negotiation, this like trying to bleed the person in charge of the discs to get him to go where you wanted. And when you were in control of discs, you know, you're like, all right, where do we want to go? I don't care. You guys tell me. I'm up for sale to the highest bidder. Anyway, I can't recommend this game enough. I know, Kellen, you've played this a number of times, and it was on your top 50 list.
It was number 19, Mark. There is not many games, and it's perhaps the single greatest game where, whether it's your turn or someone else's turn, it does not feel like it matters. Like You're equally yoked, equally invested in different ways, but time passes so quickly when you're playing Genoa. And it is a longer game. It's definitely over 2 hours, at least every time I've played it. But time goes by so quickly because you are anxiously engaged in every movement of every player the entire time.
Right.
And one of the things I love is the ability to sort of bid for them to go somewhere, hoping that they're going to sell you a thing, and then they don't sell you that thing. So like you can say, well, I'll trade you money for that silk. Like, I want you to go there, but I also want the silk that you get from there. And they'll say, well, I'll go there, and then maybe we'll talk about that. You know, so there is just this paranoia from who's fulfilling contracts. There is so much going on. It is such a rich, unique experience that I don't feel like has been replicated. And I do think it's rife for a 1.5 hour version.
Right. Our game went just over 2. It felt a little bit on the long side. So yeah, I agree with you. If you could cut a little bit of that out, that'd be even better. But time did fly because, again, you're always invested.
I remember when Kellen described it on his top 50 list. I mean, Euro games with negotiation are sort of a specific subclass that just speaks to me, like, really fundamentally. I've always had fun playing the negotiation games with the two of you, especially. So this sounds like something we have to do, the three of us, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, and I think Blue Tank would also love it a lot, so that could be a good one there. It's one of those that unfortunately just sits on my shelf waiting because we keep getting new games.
Sure. Right. What's great about it is it's not intimidating at all. Except, I mean, if you're put off by the negotiation thing, sure. But aside from that, it's just such a straightforward Euro game. Like, the mechanics of it, you've played 100 times before, so there shouldn't be like a anxiety about, oh, well, I get it. Because it's very simple. So that is Genoa.
Cool. I played a few games this week, but when I was thinking of the one I wanted to talk about, the one that kept jumping in my mind, especially given this week's topic, is Paku Paku.
Paku Paku.
And it will be saying something about Paku Paku, say that in a week that included The Wizard Always Wins, Paku Paku is the silliest game I've played this week. It's kind of incredible. It's very simple. It's a 5-10 minute game of real-time dice rolling and stacking. And the way it works in a nutshell is you have a central little disc that's flat on the table, a bunch of like cups, saucers, and bowls that are sort of littered around the disc. Then you have 5 dice, and you distribute the dice among the players. If you're playing a 4-player game, one person will have 2 of them, everyone else gets 1, and then you just start rolling them. The dice have 3 different types of faces. So some of them are just scoring, which you ignore during the real-time rolling phase. Some of them are a green face, which means you pass the die immediately to the player to your left. And one of them is a stacking face, which as soon as that shows up, what you have to do is grab an item from the table and sort of stack it onto the top of the pile. The stack of plates and dishes and cups, as you can imagine, just getting taller and taller in like a single column. And that's kind of the whole game. If at any point you have all 5 dice, anyone at the table can shout, "Paku, stop," and then you roll all the dice, and that's when the scoring comes in. Any scoring faces you roll are points which are counted as negative at the end of the game. Otherwise, if at any point the stack falls, whoever knocks it over also rolls all of the dice that they have in front of them at that time and get negative points that way. And that's basically it. That's the whole game. So it's a game of frantically rolling dice, trying to get the faces that you need to pass the die on. Otherwise, sort of stopping what you're doing to go like, God damn it, grab a piece, put it in the middle of the thing, try do this in a way gingerly so you don't knock over the stack. Meanwhile, dice are coming towards you from the right-hand side, and you're sort of grabbing them all and keep rolling them and passing them on. There's this awesome, like, feeling of tension as you see the dice moving around the table, because you have these moments where you roll 2 green faces, you pass them on, you're like, okay, that's it, I'm clear for a little bit. But then you get a couple more and you just keep rolling those, and then you sort of slow down and you see the dice coming towards you again, and that's the whole game. It's this train of dice that are like future problems,
right?
And hoping that you get rid of yours before the rest of them come your way.
My favorite memory of Paku Paku is we were playing it, and at one point one player had 3 of the dice in front of him and he was struggling, and I kept saying, kill him, kill him, kill him. And he just got so flustered that we were all like trying to send the dice to him that he just like, I think he rolled like a red face to stack something and completely like bungled it and it fell. But it was just like, just the tension that we were able to like heap on this guy was hilarious.
And that's definitely the best part, because you get these moments and waves where you see a glut of dice at one person, and it's like all that matters at that point is you just get as many dice as that person as possible. It's very silly and a lot of fun. I imagine that you would have fun with this whoever you are. It's incredibly simple. This is not going to quite make my list this week, but I'm going to say it was borderline because of how simple it is.
I think, and we'll be doing some comparing and contrasting in the top 5, but you know, if you compare this to Tuki, a game we covered last week from Plan B Games, there is an element of actual analytical skill required in Tuki, whereas this is speed. Roll as fast as you can. Like, there's no element that you have to consider anything. The only consideration would be trying to gingerly place the cup on top of the stack, but you don't really have
choices to make.
You don't have a choice in how you do that, and that inherently makes it feel different and lean more party game as opposed to Tuki, which is obviously still a party game, but as I mentioned last week, made me feel like a failure in life.
That is Paku Paku by Ravensburger. So that's going to lead us into our main topic of dexterity games. But before we do that, this would normally be the segment of the show where we read a review. But in lieu of that this week, we got a really charming email.
This is the greatest email that we've ever received, in my opinion.
So let's read that out. This email comes from Isla. It's titled Hello from a Fan. Hello, Board Game Barrage members. My name is Isla. I am 12 years old. I'm on the girls' hockey team and play guitar and piano. I've been listening to your podcast for over a year and have really enjoyed it. I liked the recent Gen Con Day 1 to 3 episodes, especially when Kellen tried to tell everyone what your room number was. That was so funny. Me and my dad laughed at that for so long. So at least Kellen has a fan.
I want to just apologize at this point for Kellen's behavior, Isla. That is not how adults are supposed to act.
My dad's the one who got me into board games. He's loved them ever since I can remember and have enjoyed sharing a passion and love for board games with him. I was looking at your website and noticed that I have some things in common with most of you. I love one of Kellen's favorite games, Cosmic Encounter. I agree with Neelan about what style of games he likes. I love a good puzzle too. I've never played any of the games Mark has, but they all look very interesting.
Try hard.
Incorrect, Isla. I have a couple of questions. If you could only play one game on the whole world for the rest of your life, what game would you pick? If you could pick your favorite theme for a board game, what would it be? I would pick space-themed. I would probably pick space-themed too, actually. This is probably the longest email I've ever written in my entire life, so I'm going to stop talking now. I hope to hear back from you soon. Isla.
Isla, that was amazing. Thank you so much for writing in. That's great. And again, I just want to reiterate my apologies for Kellen's behavior. I'll do a better job of editing him out.
I mean,
on your behalf.
She's probably almost 13, and then she can see PG-13, Mark. Okay. And you're allowed to say F- at least 3 times in a PG-13 film in 2019.
Okay, well. I cannot believe that this is your response to a 12-year-old writing into us is to curse 5 times.
I'm speechless.
Yeah, it's amazing.
All
Thank
I
you.
can think is curse words.
When we got that email, we just passed it around saying, can you believe this? So awesome.
It made my day. It
For
literally
sure.
did. That was really incredible. I love that something that you do is listening to the podcast with your dad. That's awesome. Like, yeah, and sharing that passion together with him is such a
Super
cool
cool.
thing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for writing in, Ida.
Makes you wish you had a better relationship with your children, Neelan. Well, I'm not
Yep.
sure. Why are you laughing?
I shouldn't have laughed. I feel bad about Neil's relationship with his
Right. I mean,
children.
I get to see them for visitation.
But best theme of any game, Mark's would be steampunk.
I hate steampunk. Space isn't bad. That's a good question. What would I pick for a theme? Isla, as a listener to the show, you know I'm a big fan of history, so I do like games that are steeped in historical themes.
You can see that. That feels on track for you.
Yeah.
Did you give an answer yet? No?
No, you just kept talking.
Sorry.
I think for me it is some space theme as well, but it's the least hard in terms of science fiction. Like Neelan is a little bit more like sci-fi, like
Yep, that's me.
Needs guns and accurate science.
Guns.
Well, needs accurate science.
Yes, okay, sure.
Where I prefer more of a space opera or even something that's just sort of alt near future science fiction is probably my favorite genre. But how that applies to board games remains to be seen. Because space opera is like Twilight Imperium, and no one likes that stupid
Or
one.
Star Wars. You're a big Star Wars guy.
You know that Star Wars copied Dune. They stole it all from Dune. Why are you laughing?
I mean, that's,
I don't know.
You've
right.
read Dune.
Because you're saying
You've
that
played
in
Dune.
an antagonistic way.
It's not an antagonist. It's just the facts. Do you like facts?
Look it up with George Lucas.
I have. I've written him a strongly worded note when I was a 12-year-old.
Let's get into our feature topic. We're going to be talking about our top 5 favorite dexterity games. So a quick reminder of how we do these lists. We compile a list of at least 5 games, typically about 7 or 8. We send them to our intern, the Blue Tank, and we get a list back, which is if someone has the same game that is on someone else's list but higher, they get to keep it on their list. The reason we're mentioning this in this explicit detail is because this was apparently the most contentious top 5 list compilation we've ever had. A lot of mine got bumped, it turns out. But it's in the interest of giving you guys 15 unique games for us all to talk about.
Mark has more passion than you.
Yeah,
That's
Mark
what I
apparently
read.
likes all of these a lot more than I do.
I ranked them all number 1.
Wait,
That's a winning
loophole.
move. It's a winning move, yeah.
but let's get right into it, starting with Kellen. What is your number 5 game?
My number 5 favorite dexterity game of all time is Riff Raff. Riff Raff is a game that features the board as a component of the game. You use the board to build a boat. That pirate ship has a weighted ball underneath it that you can sort of push the ship, and then the ship moves and reacts almost as if it's at sea. There is some physics force going on here that I'm unable to clarify or explain.
Gravity.
No, but it sort of rocks like it's in the ocean. It's not gravity.
Mostly gravity.
Okay, well,
Who could say?
who can say? And in the game, you bid using your number cards, and the number cards are the order in which you have to place on the boat, but also that dictates the order in which you place on the boat. So there is the base of the boat where it is easier to place things, and then the scaffolding as you go up the rung where the lookout is for, the guy looking for other pirates at the top. You're trying to get rid of all your pieces. If you put a piece on the board and stuff falls off, you can try to catch it, which I think is a fairly novel way to do that. And if you catch it, you don't get as as if you don't. It's so novel. This is a convention game. You see someone playing this at a convention, everyone wants to know what it is. It packs back into a standard board game box. I really, really enjoy Riff Raff. This game would, as a mechanism for a dexterity game, it is actually my favorite. I would say that the game surrounding the mechanism is kind of annoying, almost like a party game in which the game is more fun than the scoring. Right. Similar for Riff Raff. Riff Raff would be my number 1 if they did away with a little bit of the try-harding of like who's going to bid what and the gamesmanship that goes along with that. What do you guys think of Riff Raff?
It's great. Yeah, I think, like you said, like the swaying of the boat is
Gravity?
Yeah, by gravity is novel. I've not seen many games that have like a perpetual motion type behavior to them, and that's one of them.
I have not played Riff Raff. I have a copy of it that I'm eager to play, but I have yet to play it. I have not riffed nor raft.
Mark, what is your number 5 game?
I'm glad
dexterity
you asked,
game of all
as
time.
a host.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did your job, which was hosting. My number 5 is a game that I think is criminally underappreciated. This is Flick 'em Up, Dead of Winter. I like Flick 'em Up as well. It didn't make my list, but I'm talking specifically about the Dead of Winter version of the game, which is a co-op version. So basically, Flick 'em Up is a game where you have you set up buildings on the table, and you're basically flicking little discs at zombies that are sort of encroaching on you round by round. What makes this co-op version, I think, the superior version of the two, is that there's a lot of tension in these flicking games, especially like these adversarial flicking games, like Flick 'em Up, the original version, you're shooting down the other team, which is fun, but I feel like there's a pressure in that can get a little negative. But when you're all sort of banding together to kill the zombies, I think it makes for a more fun, sort of like the entire table cheers when you do something positive. It's funny because this game had a lot of hoopla when it first came out. The mixture of Flick 'em Up and Dead of Winter seemed so crazy, but it seemed to have been released and gone without much fanfare, and I think that's a shame. I think it's a really great flicking game, and love the co-op nature of it. So my number 5 is Flick 'em Up, Dead of Winter.
If I could posit a reason maybe why that might be the case, there's something about the scenario setup, the elaborate setup in general, actually, of this game that would put me off of it a little bit, which is that it takes a fairly long time to you consult the scenario book and set up this terrain in this exact specified way. But I do like it, and I like it a heck of a lot more than Flick 'em Up, that's for sure. The original, I mean. Flick 'em Up, Dead of Winter, like you said, the co-op dexterity game is a novel genre that I would like to see more of.
It's just so arduous, right? Like Catacombs is another one that's this 2-hour-long plus, dexterity dungeon crawling game. And who is that for, man?
Right.
Most of the games on my list you set up in 35 seconds and then you're off to the races. But it is interesting seeing the differences between dexterity games, because it runs quite the gamut from, Paku Paku to, a scenario-based, hidden
Zombie,
roll,
right,
crossover. It's crazy.
My number 5 game is Bugs in the Kitchen.
Oh, this almost made a list. Did it really? Yeah, for sure.
That's funny. I was not expecting to talk about this today, but a lot of my games got bumped. But Bugs in the Kitchen is close to my top 5 because it's very silly, and it's very good for how silly it is. It's basically a kid's game, but it's a really novel one. If you've seen those sort of micro bugs that have are battery operated and sort of vibrate along the table, this game uses one of those in sort of a plastic maze. The maze is sort of made up of knives and forks and spoons that sort of rotate along the middle, and as you sort of rotate them, you're sort of opening and closing doors in the maze. You put the bug in the middle of that, it roams around following random sort of exits and entrances, and on your turn you roll a die, and that will tell you whether you're going to rotate a knife, a spoon, or a fork. You roll the die, you pick one of the things to rotate, and then you pass the die to the next player. And you keep doing this while the bug is moving around. You're trying to coerce the bug as best as you can toward your corner of the thing. It's so great. Like Riff Raff, a game that's sort of continuing, is in constant motion in between your turns, and you're sort of just you're rushing to try close off gaps because it's moving towards someone else's corner. You're trying to sort of half flick it around the corner so it's coming towards your end of the board. There's a lot of goofiness in there, and it's all the better for it.
Whenever I brought this game out, it's always hit. Everybody has a great time. I make the bug reveal at the end. I explain the rules, and then at the last thing I do is I turn the bug on and see him skirt around.
Everyone's like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a racing game. People are just screaming for the bug, the cockroach come over to their corner. It's great.
Because there's so little predictability to what it's going to do, it's just fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of times where it's coming straight towards you, and then the last second it turns.
Yeah, exactly.
It's awesome.
I've never played this game.
Oh, weird. That's actually
a shame.
That is a shame.
No one's invited me.
You bring Riff Raff, and I'll bring Bugs in the Kitchen.
Okay.
Kellen, what is your number 5 game?
There you go, Kellen.
Nope.
Let's have a host.
Nope, it's not, because I've already given my number 5 game.
Damn it. Kellen, what is your number 4 game?
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, you're welcome.
My number 4, best dexterity game of all time, is actually perhaps the best dexterity game ever made, even though it's my number 4.
Not how lists work, but it's okay.
This is junk art. I think that my hot take, my net that we've been editing out as we've recorded this episode, is that dexterity games are all based on novelty, and that novelty inevitably runs out at some point. And so junk art smartly gets ahead of this by giving you different missions. So there are, I think, 10 different modes. So junk art is a collection of all these pieces, and then you do a series of challenges that change the rules of the game. So some of them are simultaneous, where you're trying to just stack the tallest structure, and then it ends when something happens. Some of them are turn-based, where you're all collectively building one structure, and making things fall is a problem. Some of them you're building structures with your neighbors, and you're sort of building a structure to your left and to your right. But it has a bunch of unique pieces. It goes quick. Perhaps its downside is that you're kind of always like, which game are we doing now, and how does that work? But it allows for a lot of flexibility, where you might get tired of Jenga. It's like, well, only one thing happens in Jenga. Kneel and it up, and it falls over. In junk art, there are multiple missions, and you string them along in a different way, and you score victory points for each one, and then there is sort of a collective winner. Junk art. You guys like junk art?
Yeah.
I've actually never played it.
Oh.
Weird enough. There was a point in time where I was like very excited to like buy it and play it, and then I think you guys had a copy of it, and somehow I just never got around to playing it. But
there's a
cool.
wood edition and a plastic edition. You know, this company, Pretzel Games, also made Men at Work, and Men at Work felt like a cute, adorable, specific one game version of junk art.
Right.
So it was a little like, yeah, you made it cuter, but also you took out 9 out of 10 of the game modes. I guess that's fun. That is junk art. My number 4. Best dexterity game of all time / de facto best dexterity game of all time.
Great. Perfect.
Good luck with the show notes.
Everybody loves air hockey. That is a verifiable fact. But what happens if you want to play air hockey?
You didn't even get introduced.
I was going to say,
I've given up on that.
We don't even know what you're talking about right now. Why are you talking about air hockey?
I'm not even going to.
Let's carry on with the show. Mark, what is your number 4 game of all time?
Everybody loves air hockey. That's a verifiable fact. But what happens if you want to play air hockey, which you always do, but you don't have electricity
or air?
You're in a vacuum. Don't have space for a big air hockey thing.
Do you have
Can't
gravity? Are you in space?
You always. Well, I guess you didn't have gravity.
Yeah.
Gravity is required for this game, as I think it is for most dexterity games. This is KLASK.
Except Riff Raff, apparently.
Right. That's optional for Riff Raff. This is KLASK. KLASK is sort of a air hockey without the air, without the plugging anything in game. Whereas air hockey uses air, KLASK uses magnets. The magical power of magnets.
How do magnets work?
Nice. What you're doing is you're controlling a sort of like a pawn-looking piece that has a magnet on the bottom of it by using another pawn-like piece underneath the board that has a magnet, and you're sort of controlling it by sliding your piece around the table. What you're trying to do is there's a ball on the KLASK table, and you're trying to knock it into your goal, which your opponent is defending. However, there's a couple twists. You score a point if your opponent falls in their own goal, which can happen in the frantic nature of KLASK. And also there's these 3 little magnetized pieces that start each round along the center line.
The mini demons.
The mini demons, as Kellen likes to refer them to.
Canonical.
Right, exactly. The Scandinavians call them the mini demons. It's like a Scandinavian folklore. Anyway, so as you're knocking the ball around and you're moving your pawn around, these mini demons that are magnetized can go all over the place, and they can attach to your pawn. And if your pawn ever has 2 mini demons, what do they call that in Scandinavia?
They call that damned to hell.
Yeah, so you're at that point considered damned to hell, and your opponent scores a point. So
that's the only downside.
That's the only downside. Then you reset. So, yes, KLASK is a fantastic game. If you like air hockey, KLASK is a no-brainer. The only downfall is it's only 2 players, but now there's a KLASK 4-player
I was going to
version.
say, did either of you play the 4-player
We did
one?
not. I thought at Gen Con.
yeah.
I didn't get a chance
I was tempted
to play it. But I love KLASK. You guys have both played it?
I've played it once, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a copy of KLASK at work, actually, that I keep out to challenge anyone who wishes to try to get some dominancy over me in the workplace.
You reassert your
I have to assert dominance for anyone who works for me or who challenges me or who writes a strongly worded email to me. I just write back, get your hand under the table and play me in KLASK.
Yeah. And that is KLASK, my number 4 dexterity game of all time.
My number 4 game...
The gravity's off.
KLASK is available at your local Target, by the way.
Or Target.com or the Target Lifestyle. Well, there's a new Target that's like 5 feet from here. It's a new type of Target.
A new type of Target? What does that even mean?
You know, when you're shopping and you're looking for, you just need one pair of boxer briefs or some one little thing of cereal. You know what you have to do, Neelan?
Yeah.
Go to your local Target home store where the checkout lines are plentiful.
Yeah.
And there's always someone there with a smile on their face.
That sounds great, Kellen. I'll go there right now.
It's better than Walmart. I personally go there. And when you're there, please be sure to mention the promo code BGB Barrage for 10% off your order.
Say that to the checkout cashier, like they'll know exactly what you mean.
And now back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Is any of that making it in?
Yeah, all of it's making it in. What are you talking about?
Unlicensed okay, fine.
I mean, they paid us, Neil. What are you talking about?
My number 4 dexterity game is Hamsterrolle. This is a pretty classic style of dexterity game where you, on your turn, you take a piece, you have to try put it higher than a certain mark, and you have to keep it stable, or if a piece falls off, it comes back to you and you put it on later. But the whole thing is happening on this rotating wheel that's about a foot and a half across.
The size of like a standard board game box, basically.
Yeah.
It's as wide.
Well, yeah, it's exactly as wide as the box it comes in, weirdly enough. You put this sort of face up on the table so that it can roll freely in either direction. And there are little notches, like little ledges sort of built into the inside surface of it. So the pieces you're putting on the thing have to go onto one of those ledges or on top of an existing piece so that it becomes the new highest piece on the wheel. So as you're doing this, you can imagine that there are other pieces below it on the wheel. And as you place it, the wheel starts to roll. So as it's doing that, other pieces are shifting and moving, and some might fall off. And it's this very fun balance of trying to get the center of rotation right, so it moves exactly as much as you want it to move, finding the right weight piece at the right position so that it doesn't move too much and knocks everything down below it. It's really clever. Like, it's a very simple mechanism that sort of, it gives it, again, another unique twist onto dexterity, where it's, you're not just stacking, you have to compensate for the motion of the wheel constantly. And then when everything falls off, everyone shouts, Hamsterrolle! And you repeat. That is Hamsterrolle.
You know what causes those pieces to fall?
Is it gravity?
It's gravity.
Gravity is pretty crucial in dexterity games, it turns out.
The jury is still out on science.
on science in general. Yep. Kellen, what is your number 3 game?
My number 3 favorite dexterity game is called Animal Upon Animal. Haba Games makes some of the best dexterity games in the business. They are mostly aimed at children ages 0 through 5. So, Isla, this is perfect for you.
Isla's way past this.
I love it. What are you talking about?
You're saying Isla should play kids games. Isla's like advanced. She's listening to this show, for heaven's sake.
She's looking at Mark's list and wanting to play 18xx games.
That's right.
Anyway, Animal Upon Animal is a game. There's an alligator. It's in the middle. You roll a dice, and then you have other animal shapes that you then must stack on top. This game is intended to teach 2-year-olds how to grip objects. I'm not lying. When you open the box, that's the first thing you're greeted by is a little pamphlet with a baby and the baby's hand, kind of like... But I enjoy this. I've given it to many friends who have had children, to be honest with you, because I enjoy playing it with them. You can make beautiful pictures of just animals stacked in all silly ways. There's shapes that are more or less ish than other shapes. So, you're kind of putting the snake, and you use the snake to cover up more of the alligator so that there's nowhere good to place, and then they have to place a sheep, and then they're mad at you. This is Animal Upon Animal. It's very fun. It is a game that will never leave my collection until I have as many children as Neelan.
I've heard a lot about this. I've never played it.
Which is 6. That we know of.
That I know of.
My number 3 dexterity game, that is Meeple Circus. What makes this game for me is the third round. So what you're doing in this game is you're drafting pieces. These are all sort of associated with circus. So you have like gymnasts and strongmen, and you have animal-shaped meeple pieces and sticks and balloons and various, again, circus-related shaped pieces. And in the first couple rounds, you are using the pieces you've drafted to just build the highest structure you can with some rules, like the blue meeples have to be at the bottom, the yellow meeples have to be somewhere in the middle, and the red meeple need to be on top of the structure. But what makes this game is the third round, because in the third round... Oh, okay. Kellen is playing the Meeple Circus theme song. So in the third round, what you're doing is, whereas the first 2 rounds everybody was building at the same time, the third round you are building one at a time with very unique restrictions.
Kellen's dancing to this right now, which is spectacular to watch.
Dancing a la sort of obnoxious DJ style.
I will be a DJ next month, Mark. At my sister's wedding.
Okay.
DJ Callan.
DJ Callan Allen. So in the final round of Meeple Circus, one of the things you draft is a restriction. So you can have a restriction where you only use one hand. You can have a restriction where you have to cover one of your eyes. There's a restriction where you have to clap every time you place a piece, or every time you place a piece, you have to tell the backstory of that piece. So the reason this is so great is because, again, the first two rounds, everybody's been building at the same time. There's some pressure in building your structure, but everybody's sort of building at the same time. There's no focus on you. But that third round where all the eyes are on you, and, there's, as Kellen sort of demonstrated, there's different circus-related music that you can choose to play while people are taking their third round. And I've seen the most handshaking in the third round of Meeple Circus as I have in any game ever. And I've been a victim of that handshaking at one time when I was playing it. And it's crazy because, you've been building these structures, semi-large structures in these first two rounds. And in the third round, you have the exact same pieces. And the only restriction is you're using one hand, or you're, again, covering one eye. And your hand can't stop shaking. Right. You can't even put three pieces on top of each other. It's excruciating. To be fair. It's completely terrifying, but it's hilarious. It's also hilarious. I just love that third round. I love that. And I love when I teach this game to new players, springing that third round on them as we are playing.
Yeah, that's my favorite way to teach it as well, is each round, because there's a minor rule change in the second round as well, right. And then teaching it as a reveal each round that comes out is a fun way to do it.
So my number 3 game is Meeple Circus.
Yeah, this was also on my list. It's a fantastic game. It's a bigger, more expensive dexterity game, but it's absolutely worth it. I've never had this not go well with a group of people.
Yeah, the escalation is so smart,
right?
From round to round, that having to put on a show in the third round of the circus is just terrifying.
Yeah. My number 3 dexterity game is Drop It. The way this works is you have 2 vertical sheets of plastic so that they enclose a space, kind of like Connect 4 style, if you imagine that. And you're dropping tiles, little flat tiles of various shapes and colors into this grid. The edges of the grid and the bottom of the grid are marked with zones where colors or shapes are not allowed to touch. So you might have zones at the bottom where a red shape should not touch, or a green shape shouldn't touch, or zones along the right-hand side where a specific shape cannot touch, like, say, the circle cannot touch that edge, or the diamond can't touch that edge. All you're trying to do is pick one of your pieces, drop it into the grid so that it is hitting certain scoring zones, so there are demarcated scoring heights and sort of scoring bubbles, while not touching the no-go zones, basically. So there's this fun challenge of sort of trying to target specific parts of the grid while avoiding others. As with any good dexterity game, there's a fair amount of, I don't want to say randomness, but there's a little bit of, because these things hit from pretty high up and they bounce, right? So you're sort of trying to target specific spots where you can wedge them in, but the fun is in the off chance that they're going to bounce off to the side and hoping that that's not going to throw your turn awry. There's an interesting amount of decisions in choosing the right shape based on where you're trying to hit. There are limitations on the shape and the color that you can pick, and you're mitigating that with sort of how many points you're trying to get by dropping a specific shape. When you pull off these sort of perfect moves, like just wedging a triangle sort of in an exact right spot so it just holds, I've had moments where you sort of balance a circle just on a flat, narrow piece, and that's always fun. That is Drop It.
I like Drop It a lot, and I think it feels fairly novel compared to even all the other dexterity games we've mentioned. There is this element, like you mentioned, of do I go big or do I do the safe, really easy option?
Exactly.
And then there's always a lot of screaming and arguing about whether or not your piece has touched the bubble that it needs to score those extra points. Though I do wonder how this game would fare without gravity.
Who can say?
Well, it probably wouldn't work, so it's not as it's not a very accessible.
They would have to rename it
dexterity game.
Yeah.
It's
you
good.
could still drop it.
Oh, I guess. Yeah. They have to change the key mechanics, I guess.
That's right.
Have you played this?
I have played it.
It's fun.
Yeah, I thought it was okay. Wasn't a huge fan, actually.
You got.
I don't remember if I got. I remember not caring whether or not I got or I didn't get it.
Got or not, yep.
My number 2 best dexterity game of all time is PitchCar. PitchCar is so fun, has a very high toy factor. This is a game of racing cars around a giant track. So that's the first problem with PitchCar is you need a giant box, and you need to not just buy one set of PitchCar pieces, because if you buy one set of PitchCar pieces, you have a pretty shitty track. And this is a game where each player takes a turn, flicking their disc. You are trying to go around the track a certain number of times. Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower loves this game, runs huge tournaments of it at every convention. There are so many optional expansions that add ramps, that add loop-de-loops, that adds death-defying corners without the railing that you need. There are a lot of different ways in which to play this with variants. There are ones that discourage you from knocking into the other players, which I find bollocks, because knocking into other players is the fun of the game. But there is just something about PitchCar that reminds me of being like an 8-year-old with Hot Wheels, with the Hot Wheels track where you're just ramming cars into people. Well, that sounds less nostalgic. Have you guys played PitchCar?
Yeah, I played it once, and this was actually on my list based on that single player bit.
Yeah.
It's so good for how simple it is. I think it being a race game makes it also pretty novel in the dexterity space. And it's one of those games where you want to believe that you can pull off incredible daring moves constantly, and then you just fail spectacularly every single time, and that's what makes it funny.
I do love, as you get further and further out of the race, you get more and more desperate.
Right.
So your shots get even more ridiculous, which is it's just fun.
Yeah.
That is PitchCar, my number 2.
My number 2 dexterity game is among my top diamond in the rough games overall. This is Safranito, which is a game I don't see much about. Kellen is rolling his eyes.
No, I just knew this would be on your list.
I love this. This is a great game.
Yeah, but is it?
I want to hear what your quarrels with it are after I tell the listeners why it's such a great game. So what you're doing in Safranito is the core mechanism is very simple. You are trying to acquire ingredients for recipes that you're trying to fulfill. So there are 3 recipes at the beginning of every turn, and you're trying to acquire the ingredients for the recipes to fulfill them. But the way that you acquire ingredients is you are throwing chips, poker chips, basically, onto a board where bowls are depicted that carry the ingredients. Chips you have are numbered from 10 to 60. When you flick the discs into the space, you try to flick them face down so only you know the amount that's on the chip that you're throwing. But, that can be, because of gravity, that can be flipped around or whatever, and so sometimes that's revealed. But once everybody throws their chips out, any chip that lands in a bowl is flipped number side up, and that then sets the price for that ingredient. Say Kellen threw a 50 because he has one of the ingredients and he's looking to sell it, and so he's trying to set the price high. But I don't have the ingredient and I want it, so I throw a 10 in there. So now, I was hoping that just my 10 would land in there so I could buy it for 10 each. But because Kellen was looking to sell it for as much as possible, he threw a 50. So now the price is set at 60. So Kellen can sell his, whatever it may be, and these are all ingredients that are mainly in Indian style food. So you have like curries and peppers and stuff like that. It's a very beautiful looking board, a lot of like reds and oranges, very lush. Once the price has been set, you can sell the item if you want. You can buy the ingredient if you want, and it just goes around. You're just doing that, buying and selling ingredients to fulfill these recipes. It is truly a dexterity / economic game, which is, I don't know if there's another game that fits that bill, but I just think it's such a novel space, and I think it's done very well. My number 2 is Safranito. So what do you not like about Safranito?
What does the word mean, first of all?
Is it even English?
It's definitely not. It's set in like India, right?
Yeah.
One of the prettiest boards ever.
Yeah.
Cool art style.
Yes.
I object to, and this is something that we talked about at Gen Con, how much does dexterity lead into party game versus how much does dexterity lead into actual Euro game mechanisms?
Yeah.
We played Mega City Oceanos.
Oceania.
Who can say if that word is English either, where there is a combination of standard Eurogame mechanisms combined with a can you do this dexterity challenge. And the only thing that leads to is me being infuriated.
Okay.
So Safranito has a fun little market going on,
right,
and I'm excited to engage with that. And then it's almost like, like we're playing a normal Euro game, but before we start, you have to shoot a basketball hoop, and then if you make it,
yeah,
then you can take your turn.
Wow.
And if you don't make it,
Yeah.
then you just skip your turn.
Right.
And that is, I get it, and I think that's cool. And for people who like I want to like Safranito.
Yeah.
But it's so infuriating to miss the basket, and
Right.
then it's like, just skip your turn. And it's like,
Right.
well, like, how do you engage with that?
It's interesting because I thought your complaint was going to be when you started down that road was going to be the exact opposite. All you want to do is play like a dexterity game, and there's this other game that's in the way. But it's funny because just the way you framed your argument sounds awesome to me.
Yeah, but like, let's go play Wingspan, right?
Like shoot baskets before? Great.
Yeah,
I'd love to do
and
that.
if you don't make the basket,
Let's
you
do it.
skip a turn.
I'm down to do this immediately.
Well, where are we going to get a basket?
Is the dexterity side of Safranito like a fun, engaging
I think
thing?
it's great.
Okay.
Because
that would be enough.
because of the confrontational part of it, too. Kellen is right. You have, I think, 4 or 5 throws, depending on player count. And if you miss all your throws, that can hose you.
Okay.
Yeah, there are situations where you might not even be able to make what's a relatively easy throw and play it safe. I just think that tension, that knocking around thing, you can have a disc that goes out there that's a miss, that it subsequently lands somewhere because somebody knocked it in there.
It's certainly not a problem with the design of the game. It's just that combination.
Sure, yeah.
The more you lean into actual Euro-esque mechanisms, the more efficient that I want to be.
Sure.
Right.
And then it becomes a challenge, to even engage. It's not like you didn't know what to do. It's that you physically
You could not.
You
Yeah.
just have to embrace the chaos. Just embrace it. Or alternatively, you can get good.
Wow.
I had Safranito before you were born, Mark.
This is my number 2 game, Safranito.
My number 2 dexterity game is Puzzle Fighter. This is a dexterity loosely based around a dungeon crawl. It's a cooperative game where you're walking through a dungeon, you're getting weapons, but the weapons determine sort of how you throw dice in the game. So you have a massive target that's on the middle of the table, and when you get a weapon, it will say like either spin the die.
Okay, well, hold on one second. This is Puzzle Fighter?
Puzzle Fighter, yes.
Okay, because this sounds a lot like Dungeon Fighter.
Oh, it is Dungeon Fighter.
Okay, because this is my number 1 game. So thanks for stealing my thunder. As you were explaining it, I'm like, wait, I've never heard of Puzzle Fighter. Like, I was gonna like riff off of that and say, oh, I've got a fighter game too, which is Dungeon Fighter. And then as you're explaining it, it sounds a lot like Dungeon Fighter. I'm like, I hope there's a twist coming up. I hope there's some sort of like
Anime.
Yeah, right. So I guess we can just combine on this.
Yeah, I guess so.
So we give the list to the intern, Blue
Right.
Tank, and Neelan mislabeled his number 2 best game, Puzzle Fighter.
Right, so it didn't get crossed out by Mark's number 1 game?
Yes.
That's amazing. I did that intentionally.
Now you've stolen.
I definitely
loophole.
wanted to talk about...
My loophole was to rank them all number 1, and
Right.
your loophole was just to lie about the
Let's
name.
lie about the name of the game, exactly.
That's fair. Look, I'm willing to give you your props on that.
I was actually funny because when I got the list back, I'm like, how did I get away with this? Because I know Mark loves this game.
Yes.
Puzzle Fighter. Let me tell you all about it, though.
The original name for Dungeon Fighter.
I'm sorry. This is actually called Dungeon Fighter.
Yes.
And the way this works is you throw dice. You know what, Mark?
Sure.
I'm going to let you
Well,
continue.
you basically described it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a co-op dungeon crawl where you are trying to get to the big boss at the end of the dungeon. And the way you do it is you go around the dungeon and you are fighting these creatures. The way you fight them is they have a number of hit points, and you bounce die onto this centralized target board, and the closer you get to the bullseye, the more points of damage you do to it. And depending on the face that comes up, one face of all the die have a special symbol. If that symbol comes up, your player does a special power. And you go through the dungeon, you kill these creatures, you get gold. At the end of every sort of mini level, you can go to the shop where you can buy upgrades. Sometimes the upgrades are things like health potion. Sometimes the upgrades are things like weapons. And the way that weapons work is, like, for a crossbow weapon, you might have to, like, toss the die from farther away from the table, or in your turn you might have to have the teammate on your right hold the die, and then flick it use his hand to flick it onto the board. As Neelan mentioned, there's some weapons that force you to spin around and throw the die, or throw the die from underneath the ledge of the table. So it's just like a bunch of wacky limitations you have if you want to sort of up the difficulty and make your attack stronger.
And my favorite part is that you can combine them. So if you
Yes.
had two different weapons, you could use the power of both of them by spinning a die while you're facing the other direction from someone else's hand.
Right.
And it gets increasingly more ridiculous the more weapons you stack in that way.
Yes, and it's a very, very tough game. I've played this 5 or 6 times at least, and I've only won once. So that's something you generally want in a co-op game where it's really tough to win. Dungeon Fighter has led to some of the biggest table roars of any game that I've ever played in. There were times where, we were down to our last hero and they were down to the last health, and we had a monster that we'd barely taken any damage of, and we just said, like, okay, the only way this works is if you throw a bullseye right now. And, we're just saying this. Nobody believes it's going to happen because we've been rolling terribly. And then they just bounce the die right on the bullseye and the table just erupts.
Right.
It's just so fantastic. I was going to say it clings enough to that dungeon crawl genre, but it's not only clings enough to it, it's actually really, it feels like a dungeon crawl.
Yeah, they've
Upgrading
definitely...
the loot is like very, very, evocative of.
Yeah, they've definitely like lovingly included all of the things you would want thematically from a dungeon crawler.
Yeah, and there are a bunch of expansions. I have them all. Dungeon Fighter is such a great game. Or if you're a hipster puzzle fighter.
Yeah.
If you do it way back
superior version.
That's right.
That is my number 2 game.
And my number 1 game.
Dungeon Fighter. Kellen, what is your number 1 game?
Crokinole, an actual good dexterity game. Dungeon Fighter is also the Blue Tank's favorite dexterity game.
Cool.
Funny enough, she didn't recognize Puzzle Fighter on your list. But I prefer my dexterity games just lighter and more party-ish, I think, in general. Dungeon Fighter is fairly elaborate rules-wise, but it is funny and can be fun. Crokinole, an actual good dexterity game, was recently recommended by our good friends, Shut Up and Sit Down. So there's been a mad rush to buy all the Crokinole boards. Canada just can't export them quickly enough. Crokinole is the closest board game to a sport, I would say. This is a circular piece of wood that has rings going towards the center, and you flick discs, defying gravity, trying to get them into the center hole where you will score points. It feels like shuffleboard that you might play at a bar, except you can hang it on your wall, and it looks classy as f***. I love Crokinole. I think that if you've been in the hobby for more than a year, if you're looking on Board Game Geek, you're always seeing Crokinole. It's in the top 100, but you maybe don't know what it is. I would not recommend it for everyone because most of the boards cost over $100 to get a good one. You need to keep the wood polished. It's more of a lifestyle thing. It's something I hope to pass down to my many children someday. Everyone wants to go over to Grandpa Callan's house to play Crokinole. It also has a cool rule, which is some butt rule where you can't lift. No, what is it?
One cheek. You have to have one cheek.
One cheek rule is that is tournament rules for Crokinole. So
one cheek on the seat.
One cheek on the seat because you might want to gain a competitive advantage, but no, that's codified.
So this is when I would be doing my number 1 game of all time, dexterity game of all time, but Neelan has taken that away from me.
You don't like Crokinole?
I do like Crokinole.
You're a sporting tryhard.
I do like Crokinole.
My number 1 game is Climbing Nations. It's Ascending Empires.
Nice.
I'm very curious to hear Kellen's take on this after his takedown of Safranito.
Takedown.
But this is it's a space game. It's a dexterity game. It is a 4X game. So it's instantly speaking to me. And it's a really smart amalgamation of all of those things. The way this works is you have a space empire, you have a tech tree, you are leveling up your ships, you're moving them across the galaxy, you're trying to have combat with other players, spread out, get more ships. But the way movement works in this game is through flicking. Each of your ship is represented by a little disc or a little glass bead, depending on what version or upgrades you have. And you sort of have to flick them from their start location to wherever you want them to go. It's a game that sort of smartly combines sort of elements I love. Like, I love 4X games in general, and this very much is one. I mean, there are a lot of games that claim to be 4X games that don't quite capture all of the X's, Scythe being a good example. But despite its relative simplicity, Ascending Empires does have all the elements of a 4X game you'd like, with this dexterity game for movement and combat sort of on top of it. I found this really, really fun. Really enjoyable from both sides of it. Like, it does have that thing like Helen described where your strategic game could be compromised by your dexterity game, but I never found that to be a problem because every time I would mess up, it would be funny. Kellen, so how does this fit into your hybrid framework?
Theory.
Yeah.
So Ascending Empires does some smart things with its tech tree system, whereby if you are bad at flicking, you can invest in certain things that make it easier for you to not have to focus so much on the flicking. I have not played Ascending Empires enough or with enough ringers to know, but if someone could come in who was a pool shark type figure, buy the weapon upgrade in Ascending Empires, and then proceed to just flick shot kill everyone in the game, I would have to think that you wouldn't even like playing Ascending Empires with that person.
That could almost definitely be true. But I mean, that's true of a lot of games, right? If you play them with someone who is insanely good at them, like, that's rarely fun. I don't see that as necessarily like a specific deterrent against this one.
Nealon has very dexterous hands, so is not convinced that anyone could
possibly beat me.
Take him on in Ascending Empires.
That is my number one game, Ascending Empires. That is going to do it for our top 5 lists of our favorite dexterity games. So before we close out the show, let's talk about a few things that we're looking forward to. I know I am looking forward to our next Patreon episode, bonus episode, that we're going to be posting very shortly. So in the days following this episode, you should see a new bonus content between the sheets BGB special episode coming up in your Patreon feed.
Yeah, this is a great way to support the podcast at patreon.com/boardgamebarrage. We do talk about board games during those episodes, but we also talk about sneak peeks of what's upcoming and sort of shoot the breeze and talk about other things that are going on in our lives and the pop culture that we like.
Completely uncensored.
Is it uncensored?
Yeah, I think so.
I think
If it's not uncensored now, it will be uncensored going forward.
Yeah, a mandate. I am looking forward to vacation. I'm heading to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, Havasupai. It is a very beautiful place with waterfalls. It's going to be great. I will not be on the next episode of this podcast.
And I'm looking forward to Kellen's vacation.
I wanted to just shut everything down as the only voice that matters on the show, but somehow I do not have that authority anymore. I'm not sure how that happened as the sole proprietor of Board Game Barrage LLC.
The Kellenless episode precedent has been set.
That's true. It's the only precedent that has been set.
That's right. What I'm looking forward to is a new web comedy series that one of our board gaming friends, Dean, has put together with a couple friends of his. This is a show called Meeple People. You can find it at Meeple People Comedy if you search that on Instagram or YouTube. Again, Meeple People Comedy. It's a series of board game related, sort of like sitcom-y episodes. We've watched it. It's pretty funny. There's a lot of board gaming sort of in jokes and stuff like that. So check out Meeple People Comedy on Instagram or YouTube.
It's weird to have a show like this where the cast, there's 10 to 12 cast members on screen. A lot of the board game comedy stuff on YouTube is one or two people kind of making jokes to themselves. And so this feels kind of like a sitcom, except it's about, modern board games and they're playing Twa in the background. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
We'll also have a link to that in the show notes for the episode. So
we have played with the games that are the set decorations on Meeple People Comedy.
Yeah, that was funny. Like, Dean was sort of like corralling a lot of the games from his collection and ours just to make up the backdrops.
He stole our game.
One last thing we want to sort of mention at this point is the Discord. This is still thriving. Please join the Board Game Barrage Discord. You can check that out at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. This is a great place to talk about board games. We love all the conversations, especially in the wake of Gen Con, like talking to people about the games that we played and the people that we met up with. It's always been fun talking in there.
We've had a lot of people join up saying like that they were unfamiliar with Discord, but they've heard us talking about it enough times. They figured they dip their toe in the water. And it's just such a great, again, very welcoming, very like fun, lively space to be. So I always love seeing Discord notifications pop up on my phone, and I love engaging with the listeners.
I also had someone say that it was like one of the friendliest board game communities that they talk in, which I think is certainly no small feat. Like the internet in general is a pretty toxic place, and I think if we created like a small little oasis in like the rest of board game communities where people can feel like they can talk about things freely, that's awesome.
Discipline Daddy Nealon will ban you if you violate the code of conduct.
Absolutely.
And Discord is boardgamebarrage.com/Discord, DISCORD.
And that, I think, is going to do it for the show. Thank you all so much for listening. You can check us out on all of our social media, on Facebook, Twitter. Please leave us a review on either Facebook or Apple Podcasts. That really helps us a lot. We're still slowly working through all the reviews. We will eventually get to your review and read it on the podcast if you send one in.
Isla, leave us a review. You were so great with the email. You might as well give us a great review, too.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that, like I said, that helps us a lot. So that would be really, really appreciated. Otherwise, thank you as always to Heart Society for letting us use What's on Your Mind, Kid as our intro and outro music. Bye-bye, everybody.
See ya.
So long.
Part of physics?
Just get to your number 5.
Well, he's the host.
The transition.
Do I?
Okay, Mark, what's your number 5? What?
We always
all right,
talk
whatever.
Like every
Okay.
person on the list.
Get it
Mark,
together.
All right.
What is your number 5 game?
I'm glad
Dexterity
you asked,
game of all
as the
time.
host.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did your job, which was hosting. My number 5 is a game that I think is...
If a dad is letting their 12-year-old girl
Listen
to me go, F you, F this, F Mr. Vassal, and like she's like, LOL, Kellen's so funny or whatever, I'm like, this is awkward.
What
I
does that say
loved
with
it when
Future
Kellen was
America?
swearing constantly in Gen Con.
Yeah, isn't that what she said?
Almost
That she liked?
literally, yeah.
It's almost a verbatim quote. Oh my God.